Fire Facilities manufactures steel live fire training towers, customized to meet your training needs. Check us out at FDIC or learn more at firefacilities.com.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Cairns for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today.
Fire Service Data and Tech Talk.
Hey everybody, it's Eddie Buchanan on Fire Engineering with the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk podcast. Welcome back to another episode this month. This is an interesting one. I think you're going to find this one to be very unique. We're going to be talking about fire service data in no-tech departments, right? So we have high-tech departments, low-tech departments, and then there's some fire departments that are no-tech departments where they have, very little technical resources to work with. And we're going to talk about how does that work? What do you do when you don't have, access to computers necessarily or software or some of the bells and whistles we're used to in some cases here in the United States? So that's where we're going to go with this. Of course, I always want to remind folks of the Training Officer's Handbook on fireengineering.com. You can go to Fire Engineering Books and Videos. You'll find all kinds of cool resources there. So be sure to check that out. We wrote that book a while back. It's actually a combination of three authors. It's one of my mentors that helped me through the fire service when I was coming up through the training ranks. Then there's me, and then there's one of the fellas that I worked very close with. So John Buckman was my mentor, and then I trained Bobby Drake, who came up and then took my place later. So you have kind of three generations of training experience, which is all in that handbook. So check that out if you're interested or any way associated with training. But this week, so this topic this month comes from a conversation I had on the exhibit floor. A couple of times I've had the opportunity to meet Dave Moore with the Africa Fire Mission. We've run across each other out on the exhibit floor at different places. And we were recently this past year at TSI in Oklahoma City. And we got to talking about it again in the context of technology. And I've always been a fan of what they do at the Africa Fire Mission. I think it's an important endeavor. And so I figured, man, let's talk about, wouldn't it be cool to have a discussion about what fire departments are doing when they don't have tech? Like we're always talking about, everything from drones to all this fancy stuff. But what do you do when those resources aren't necessarily available? And how do you measure performance? And how does that go? So, Dave, I'd like to welcome you to the show, sir. And please, and wife Nancy, welcome, and give us a little bit of introduction about who you are, where you're from, and what is the Africa Fire Mission for folks that aren't familiar.
Well, thanks for having us, Eddie. Yeah, it was great to connect at TSI. And my name is Dave Moore. I'm here with our executive director and also my wife, Nancy Moore, and our fire service advocate, Jose, who is coming to us from Nairobi. And we'll let him introduce himself here in a minute. But Africa Fire Mission is an NGO that works to provide training and other resources to fire departments in developing nations. Predominantly, it's in Africa, but we've worked in a few other areas as well. We started in 2012. At the time, I was the fire chief of a suburban Cincinnati department and went on a trip to Nairobi to work with children. It was a trip I really did not plan to go on, but my wife drugged me along and told me it would be in the best interest of my well-being to go with her after she'd put up with 20 years in the fire service. Little did she know that what I would find would change the course of my life and really our life. I found that the schools we were working in had 1,000 children in them. It was 7 stories with 1 interior stairwell. They'd never done fire drills, never had access to fire department phone numbers, anything like that. Didn't know stop, drop, and roll. Thought, well, this is easy to solve. I'll go visit the fire chief in Nairobi and have him come and help these schools. When I met the fire chief, I found out that he was protecting a city of 5 million people with a land mass equivalent to that of Houston, with 2 fire engines, 180 firefighters, and most of the firefighters didn't have any PPE. So 6 months later, Africa Fire Mission was created. And over the last 12 years, we've been working and growing all across the world with providing training, equipment to fire departments, communities. And we've reached a point now where we are helping fire departments take the next step in growth. And we're talking about using data. We're talking about using information and training so that they can make good informed decisions as they advocate for their fire departments and in their communities. And we have Nancy and Jose here today that are going to talk a little bit more about how we've implemented that and some strategies that we hope to use going forward, and strategies that are being used now in departments that have absolutely no technology.
Interesting. So you said there were 5 million people, 2 fire engines. Is that what I think I caught?
Yep. In 2012, the city of Nairobi had two fire engines, 2 stations.
Wow. And how many firefighters was that?
About 180. And the last time they had hired at that point was 1987. So the new guys still had 25 years on.
Well, that's a long time to be a rookie, isn't it?
Sure is.
Wow. So Nancy, what brought you to tell us about yourself, your background, and what brought you in? Like, how did this get on your radar?
Yeah. So I met a woman named Mary Kamau with Missions of Hope International, which is a large NGO serving in Nairobi, nonprofit organization. And she really invited me to come to do my thing, which is work with social workers, or that used to be my thing. And when she found out that Dave was a firefighter, she was like, "Oh, I don't need you to come. I need him. We don't know anything about fire." And so I thought my job was just to bring him. And then what we realized is, as we're working in developing communities, we really needed the social work skills of community development to come alongside the fire service and support the work that was going on. So that's where I started coming in and helping to modify curriculum. I have learned a lot about the fire service. I thought I knew a lot as a fire wife. 25 years as fire wife. I thought I feel like I've learned a lot, but I have learned a whole lot about the fire service in that time. But what I do is I use our experts in the fire service and help them modify for developing communities and help us come alongside developing communities for the work that we're doing.
Awesome. Well, introduce us to Jose.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah. I'll let him introduce himself.
Good evening.
Well, tell us about yourself,
Jose Ngunjiri. Yes, and I'm a fire safety officer working with Africa Fire Mission. And I sit in Africa, East Africa. I usually say that I'm the cultural piece in this whole Africa Fire Mission organization, like breaking down and making people understand how we understand items, or we break down items to the African perspective. So my main job is to just talk with the community, and what Dave mentioned, that in regards a simple thing like the fire brigade number. My job is to work with the grassroots organizations and get down to the community and pass this message across. Like what you can see on my background, that's one of the reach outs we do with a big microphone and giving people the stop, drop, and roll lessons, and giving them this fire brigade number. So that's what we do.
Wow.
And a lot more other items, but that's the consistent thing that wakes me up every single day. Yeah.
So what's the state of the union kind of? What's the baseline, I guess, of where are we starting from in Africa as far as operational performance and being able to quantify that in any way? Like, how do you measure? What's that like at this current point?
It varies a lot across the departments. You will have places in sub-Saharan Africa like Johannesburg and other places in South Africa that are very first world, have good use of technology. but most of the fire departments are still operating on limited technology, limited information, analog radio systems for communications or cellular data. Most of the data that is collected and recorded is in paper logbooks, and it's a throwback to the U.S. that I remember as a kid growing up in the fire service. But there's very little access to collecting that information in electronic format. The fire departments are still working, in many cases, in a void of information. The way they get notified of fires are a variety of ways. Sometimes it's phone calls to the fire chief's personal cell phone, and they're coming into a lot of situations blind, having to figure out what to do and where to get the resources they need next.
So is like, I guess as basic as we are here in the States, I guess response time is kind of the key metric that we look at. Is there a mechanism for understanding that, capturing that?
Jose,
I know some of the conversations I've had with the Middle East, they're interested in moving forward with some of the technology and data related initiatives, but there's some infrastructure they lack, like GIS, street networks, and things like that. So I'm assuming that you're in a similar situation there.
Absolutely. And Jose, I'll let you talk a little bit more about what Eddie was asking.
Yeah. So when we get, how do the fire brigade get that information that there's a fire happening, for example, in a informal community, is either through a member of parliament, sitting in the parliament. Number two, you might find maybe a church of a pastor, or also we have now grassroots organizations who actually give these phone calls to the fire department. And sometimes with the constant job that we've been doing as AFM, Africa Fire Mission, by giving them the 6-digit number, you find that there are some other people who have direct numbers of the fire chief. So that's quite not a very reliable way, because sometimes you might find the personal numbers are either off. Therefore, when I call you, your number is off. That means the response time is much more. So right now, on the grassroots, we're really fighting that aspect of arriving on scene late, because you find the community either calling late. And if you look at it on the nitty-gritty, it's really not their problem, because they are trying to save their little resources in their small house, a 10 by 10 house. So what is priority? Me removing my my only belongings, or me calling the fire brigade? So there's that point of, I need to call the fire. I need to remove my items. Therefore, the fire brigade will come late, and the fire brigade just shows up. They depend on hoping that the traffic is less, which most of the times is not. You find there's little respect or no respect at all for the fire brigade. You find the traffic snarl up. Instead of giving way, they block the way, and they hope that somehow the police is going to release the traffic on where they find the loudest siren coming through. So those are the aspects we're trying to put in together by bringing in all these collaborators and go like, hey, what is the best approach to have? So it's still work in progress, and we hope at some point we're going to have some success.
Yeah, and I would add on, I sometimes think of it as sometimes the fire brigade starts their response when they see the smoke in the air. of a big fire. And the firefighters are wanting to respond, but the community's not understanding that in order to get them there quickly and to reduce those response times, that they have a responsibility too. And in the areas where we've been working, and Jose's been educating both the fire service and communities around this topic, we have seen reduced response times and better response where the community does start to welcome them in. I think we see this in rural areas in the United States as well, where we have the 911 infrastructure in, but sometimes people might be responding more from, first trying to protect whatever's there even before they make the calls. So we do see parallels here in the United States as well.
And a little more on the infrastructure piece. If a 911 system does exist in those areas, and that's a big if, it is not a free phone call. And in most of the developing nations, those couple of pennies that it costs to make the call to 911 are vitally important to the people making the call. So them making the call to the fire department is a financial decision that can impact how much they're going to eat. And that is a realistic barrier that is faced all across Africa and even in large cities like Nairobi and Addis Ababa.
Wow. So I'm almost wondering, if you were given the situation that you're in, if you were going to start from scratch, like Americans, we're going to always build a response model. That's what we do. We wait for the thing to happen, then we respond to it. But I wonder, like, how do you weigh what's more important, the operational response, or are you looking at more of a prevention-focused effort of education, kind of a community risk reduction sort of a standpoint, or I'm assuming probably some combination of the two? Like, what is the political kind of philosophy as far as any sort of regulation or public education? Like, what's that boundary like? What's it like on that front?
Yeah, it's really both for us. We've really looked at this from a top down, bottom up, and what's in the middle, and trying to address it from all of those aspects, from the higher levels of government to community levels of education, and making sure that the firefighters have their skills as well, so that as that infrastructure is developed, that they can respond well and educate. So it's really been a lot of all of it, which is kind of unique for our kind of organization, to approach from all three of those angles. Jose does a lot of advocacy and our team does with government officials and regulators, and trying to help them understand even what is the equipment that the firefighters need, how does a functioning emergency operations center look like, all those things. And then also using the community to help educate and advocate for themselves and what they need to be able to have the infrastructure of a reliable fire service.
Jose, what's the attitude when you go out and do this education? How is it received? How does the people there, appreciate what you're trying to do as far as your message?
Well, right now, it's super great. But when we started, we really had to not reinvent the wheel, but look at ways we could understand their situation, but then negotiate with them. It put me at a point whereby I had to put myself on harm's way in such a way that you remember what I told you, that there was no respect for the firefighters. So I had to put the full PPE and walk like 4 kilometers as I sensitize. Just let them see that a firefighter is your brother. Let them see that this person that you're throwing rocks at is your husband, is your uncle. And that was like 3 days, and they were like, okay, what's up? And then now the fourth day, we start now talking to them and telling them, hey, for us to be able to respond well, we need you to help us. Help us help you. Yeah, we are there for you. And how are we there for you? Give us that very expensive phone call. Uh, are we going to buy food, or are we going to make the phone call? And we negotiate with them and go like, you'd rather make the phone call because we're going to lose very little amount of homes than you not making any call. We do not promise that we're going to save everything, but we're going to work with you. Help us to help you. And we actually just go and use tools that they use in their home setup. The kerosene stoves. We buy those kerosene stoves and we show them, hey, this is the best way to prevent. Because we noticed as AFM, it is better to prevent these fires than the response to come in. Remember that the data that, of course, now they have added more trucks, but you find that we still need that education piece engraved in their minds that this is the way to stop these fires than for you to wait for the fire brigade to arrive. So at this particular point, it's really awesome. We're having now the grassroots organization focus groups really stepping up. We as AFM, we give them that curriculum. This is a curriculum to follow that you can download from the internet, and then get these focus groups to break that information down to even speaking with a big microphone that, hey, here's a fire brigade number 020 22 22 181. It's quite a long one, right? But that's what we do. That's what we have, and that's a way that they're gonna help us as the fire brigade to help them really control the fires. So it's been a long time coming, but I can say that we've been really seeing a very positive response. In such a way, we're having now the government entities going and saying, hey, with the data that we're receiving from these numbers that you're giving, we are seeing a reduction of fires in the informal sectors. That to us is a serious win. But then what they do not know, or what we're trying to make them know, is there's a lot of pedaling, like when you find the duck is really smooth at the top, but you really don't know how it's pedaling right down there. And that's AFM. We're really pedaling down on the surface, below the surface of the water, to empower these grassroots focus groups, these churches focus groups, these ladies focus groups, the meetings that they have in their estates, like their boroughs, the regions. We really just storm in and go like, hey, give us just 3 minutes of your time, and we're going to show you how these fires can be stopped. So yes, we're seeing quite some positive response for now.
So what data are you showing them? What are you measuring exactly?
What are we measuring? We are looking at things like from the previous fires, how many fires were reported how many calls were made to the fire brigade? How much resources were destroyed? So we have big organizations which collect this data, and how many people were affected. And when this data is collected, we need now these big organizations to go like, hey, could you please open up this data for us so that we can make it shareable for example, to the Nairobi County, so that they can know that fire prevention needs more resources. For as much as you're funding the resources of fixing the vehicles, could you please also put more funds on the prevention bit? But how do we give them? We now provide them this data. Like last week we had 2 fires, and in those 2 fires, the first fire of last week, we had 200 homes destroyed. And now we have 100 homes destroyed. So there's an improvement on the response time. We find that the guys at the grassroots calling the fire brigade on time. And one other thing I didn't mention is behind the scenes as AFM, we really make countless of meetings convincing the management that when you respond to this region, we are telling you, you will not be attacked. Your rocks are not going to be thrown at you. And we show them how many times we've been on the ground doing a fire prevention, the risk reduction. And we upload this information on our website through Google Forms. We have very simple ways of collecting this data. Google Forms. And because right now there's a very high uptake of mobile phone usage in Nairobi, or rather in Kenya. So we have service providers offering very good packages. So we use that. We tell these grassroots organizations, hey, when we reach out, could you please upload this data on this Google form? And at the end of the year, or at the end of this particular time, we shall provide this information to you, which we use that information to go now speak to the Nairobi Fire Brigade and tell them, hey, we need you guys to help the community. When they call you out, please show up. Don't go like, no, that's a hot zone. We've been on the ground and we need you to go show up because we've done the job that you guys need to do and you're going to be safe. So yeah, those are the few things that we do.
One of the challenges that has really been faced with what data is collected is it has been very, very siloed within the organizations that collect it. The government organizations have probably been the least aggressive at gathering data, but the NGOs in many cases don't share it with anybody. We've been able to be a bridge, and especially Jose, getting that information shared so that the governments who do control the fire departments are able to go to Parliament and their county executives and say, here's the information that we know. Here's how we're getting better. Here's what we need. And that's been one of the big improvements of no matter how that data is collected, just the sharing of it has changed the focus.
And I think the third piece of that is modeling data collection. So part of why we started collecting the data and just using available resources with Google Forms is we wanted to show that you can collect data, it can be powerful, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So we've started to show, hey, here's what that looks like when we collect that data. And now you can share that information back. We did a large school fire safety assessments in September, and we were able to collect the data based on those assessments or inspections, if you would, and share those back to the schools immediately with that low-tech option. And now some of those fire departments are seeing, oh, this is something that we can utilize to collect other kinds of data. Jose and I were in Nigeria earlier this year, and the fire department there is further ahead than what we see in Nairobi. And in Nigeria, there are oftentimes still collecting, again, paper logbooks of the calls that they receive. And at the end of a week, they call the head station and record all of that information. And that gets recorded onto paper. And so but yet most of the firefighters are walking around with some form of a smartphone that they can use to collect data. And so we had very simple conversations about what if you thought of moving that to a simple data collection that you could do on your phone that is, just easy to access and free to you. And we've started to see some places start to use that for some other things, but it's a slow process to change. And especially when your networks might be unreliable, or if a computer breaks down, you don't have it anymore because there's no IT services for the fire departments. So it's tricky, but modeling that data collection and figuring out other places, what's the water department gathering, what's sanitation got that can be helpful to use in addition to the NGOs. So that's been some other ways that we've looked at it.
So that's interesting. You're using basically cellular technology with mobile phones to use online available data collection.
Yep.
Works everywhere, I guess.
Yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of what we're trying to do with NARA. So, like in the rural parts of the states. It's kind
Absolutely.
of the same thing. Yeah.
Yep. I have better cell service in most parts of sub-Saharan Africa than I do in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow.
And that's one area where they have developed very quickly. When cellular went into Africa, there was already an infrastructure globally. So they just went to the top tier that was available and keep improving from there. And they haven't had to go through the gradual upgrades. And we see that with multiple kinds of technology in Africa, where it just comes in at a level that does not have to be built up gradually, as we've experienced in the US. Leveraging those is really important.
Have you seen Starlink make an appearance down there yet?
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
Yes.
I know it was an integral part of the hurricane responses in the southeast. The North Carolina stuff and all that. I was wondering if so you all are using it, Jose, huh?
Yeah. It's just begun. It's on the top level, so people are still experiencing it. We're waiting for feedback. Yeah.
Okay. That's a great head start. So, what do you think is next? If it's I'm trying to get my head around the scope of the problem. It's so broad, right? It's not like just one problem. There's a bunch of things to.
It
Absolutely.
is. Yes.
What is your next 2 or 3 years look like? What's on your agenda as far as trying to better articulate your capabilities through data and tech? What are you looking for in the future?
I think the first thing that we want to do is educate our partners, our firefighters, in the information that they should be collecting that will help them. That's the first piece, knowing what data that they need is helpful to them. And that's where the focus on education is so important for the organization. And out of that will come technology solutions. But the key is really educating them, because there is a lot of they don't know what they don't know. And it's our responsibility really as an organization, and Jose's on the ground doing that, of those simple things that we take for granted, that we've learned somehow that are important to collect, to make sure that information is conveyed.
How about, is there any GIS capability at all?
Yes.
There is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've been really working to better understand, but also help utilize that within the fire service. One of the problems that we have is, Jose's mentioned a couple times, firefighters having stones thrown at them. And that's literal. He means that. And that is a level of lack of respect that people have for the fire service, because they don't understand the fire service. And that goes all the way across the government systems, where the government leaders don't understand the capabilities and the possibilities of their fire service. And so there's access to GIS capabilities, but it's not always getting utilized by the fire service in part because no one's giving them access to it. And so it's there, it's available. There's a variety of resources that are free that they can use. And so we try to take that part of educating about what is available, what can you use for low cost, no cost, and how can you benefit from that as you respond. And for the firefighters, it's literally to keep themselves safer when they respond to communities. So I think that's been a big piece that we've really seen some progress in, and just communicating both at that government level and the community level that's available, and have a long way to go with it.
What's on your, Jose, what do you see? What are the important things for you in the next 2 years? What's on your list of things to do?
It's just bringing that consistency. We've, as AFM, we've been working really hard on getting this information of reaching out to the community without stopping. But you find when we visit a fire station, they're really fired up. They're like, yes, we're going to do it. But then 2 months down the line, you find that there's a dwindling effect whereby they report either less, or they really don't go as much outside to the doing the fire prevention as much as they're supposed to do. So this next few years that we're having in front is just encouraging them and asking them, what do they need? What help would they want? Do they want us to speak with the management? Because the advantage we have as AFM is we can walk in and speak on their behalf. We advocate on their needs without them being put on the line. They can't fire me. They can't tell me, don't come to this county. So we as AFM, of course, we don't go with an iron fist. We talk them friendly and we ask them, hey, would you mind investing more of reaching out? So we are advocating for them. We are speaking for them. And we now need to have more of these outreaches going to these 47 counties. We have 47 counties in Kenya. Reaching more to them, talking to the leaders more, and through that, we know that we'd rather prevent. And that's what I really ask the fire brigades to embrace. We'd rather prevent than react towards going to put out these fires. It's cheaper, and it's more effective when we go out there and prevent these fires. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
the fires you have, I don't know if people caught it, but you mentioned like one fire impacted 100, 200 people, 200, different homes or whatever.
Homes.
Yeah.
So more like 2,000 people.
When we talk about a structure fire here, we're talking about, usually one family, 3-4 people. A structure fire, as you said, it would be a conflagration here. That's like a major event, mass casualty type thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it doesn't get any more community risk reduction than that.
Yep.
As far as
it
the
doesn't.
core aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think the other thing that is kind of on our agenda in the next few years is continuing. We've talked a lot about Kenya, but we're working in other countries across the continent as well, and expect to continue to grow that. And so we're using Kenya as our test place for a lot of the work that we do, that community risk reduction, data collection, educating leaders, advocacy, and then training. We do a lot of firefighter training, both hands-on tactical leadership training. We've had the opportunity to do a lot on mental health and cancer reduction with the firefighters. And it's been a really great opportunity to get in on You don't have to, you can learn from our learnings and grow that. So we're always looking for people that are interested in sharing their knowledge as we continue to grow.
That's what I was going to ask. The people that listen to this show in particular tend to be the bright ones in the fire service. We have data analysts that are listening. We have technology providers that listen in regularly. What can we do to help as the listeners of this show, and how would they go about it? What can we do to help with your mission there?
Yeah, I think reaching out and talking to us with ideas that the listeners have is oftentimes the first starting point. We can discuss what's been done, what can be done, or what it would look like to develop something further in the future. And maybe that's just as us as at AFM as a connecting point to other organizations. But we know there's a ton of expertise out there, and that there are things behind the scenes that only happen when one-on-one conversations happen. And so we really encourage that. We also, when COVID came in and we had to shut down our trips to Africa, we started doing a weekly online training for the firefighters. And we really did not know how that was going to work. But that has carried on and will carry on. So every week we're doing a 1.5 hour training online, and we're able to expose all sorts of information to firefighters from now all across the globe that are joining us. It's beyond Africa. We have a lot of firefighters from the Middle East joining us. And if people want to come in and teach and share on their topics, that is a huge help. Always looking for instructors there.
And then come to Africa. We have trips going several times a year to Africa. Next year, we've got trips to Malawi, Kenya, Zambia, and we will have a few other trips probably get added this coming year as well. So join us in Africa. All the information's on our website, easy to find there. We need instructors on all kinds of topics. So it's as you said, Eddie, it's not just one thing that we're looking at. It's a very complex issue, and instructors are needed. And I know that is one of the biggest encouragements that we provide to the fire service is bringing local experts, whether it's for our online trainings or in-person trainings. We just completed a training for 400 fire and EMS providers across Nairobi. And it was just such a great encouragement for them to know that people across the world care about them when sometimes they don't feel that locally. So come train with us.
And to the listeners, our firefighters in Africa are reading Fire Engineering and the other magazines, and they know the names of the authors. They know who Eddie Buchanan is. They know those people. And when you come on a podcast or a training, the encouragement that gives them and that you will engage with them on their local level is, we really can't describe it. And that's where I say come to Africa, because that's where you will really get to see what's going on and what we're talking about. Because I know some of what we're talking about now is hard for American firefighters' minds to fathom. But when you come,
getting stoned on a response is
right.
And I don't mean the fun kind.
Right, it's a whole different kind.
Certainly, whole different kind of getting stoned. But wow, that's amazing. That's a hurdle they have to deal with. I feel like we need a data and technology task force that we could put at your disposal, that you could, whether it be consulting from stateside or going out in the field and doing some work. That sounds like that would be something we could do. I know there's data analysts, that are looking to stretch their legs, so to speak, and do some things might be outside of the norm, and the one thing about the fire service is we are always looking, where can we help? Show us the next way to help, and we'll show up and do it. So
absolutely,
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Any parting words? How do we contact you? How do we contact the Africa Fire Mission? I got the card here, but let's give us the details. What's the website?
www.africafiremission.org. Pretty much any search engine will find us pretty quickly. And right at the top there, if you're interested in our trips, is Join a Mission. And you'll find all the information about our upcoming trips, and reach out to us if you're interested in anything about what we do and how we do it. We're always looking to partner with new people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Jose, thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate you sharing your story, and we're going to see what we can do to assist.
You're welcome.
And Eddie,
Thanks for having me.
If I can share one thing that Jose has not shared, he talked about people making the decision to grab something from their burning home. He was one of those things that was pulled from a burning home as a very young child. He was trapped in a fire, has the burn scars to prove it, but he is living proof of the dangers of fire, and that in spite of injuries and setbacks, you can be a firefighter and a huge impact for fire safety around the world.
Absolutely.
Thanks
amazing. For that, please, Dave. Yep.
That's amazing. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. Like I said, I'll be talking on the back channels to the folks I know to see how can we help with this. What things could be done. A lot of smart people running around, so we'll continue to work on that. I appreciate y'all being here.
Well, thanks for having us and for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. That's a wrap for this month's edition of the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk on fireengineering.com and all of the social media outlets. That's where you find the show. If you want to get in touch with me, there's a Fire Service Data and Tech Talk page on Facebook. You can also reach us on X. The handle is @DataTechTalk. And you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. So hope everybody has a safe month. We'll see you next time.
Fire Facilities manufactures steel live fire training towers, customized to meet your training needs. Check us out at FDIC or learn more at firefacilities.com.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Cairns for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today.
Fire Service Data and Tech Talk.